The Hamster Librarian, written and illustrated by Smartie 22. This story is dedicated to my mom, a librarian, my dad, a scientist, my sister, a kindergartner, all my friends, and all the hamsters in the world for inspiring me. And last but not least, my teacher, Trevor Matea. Have you ever wondered why your pet looks at your book desperately whenever you are reading it? Well, that's because pets all love to read. When you're not home, they try to pull a book off the shelf, and if they do, they look at the letters and try to figure out what they mean. I bet you never thought about that before. But in this story, things change. Animals will get to read. Thanks for Pet Hamster. And oh no, should I just spoil the whole entire story? Well, if I did, I'm so sorry. Let me tell you about a pet hamster named White Chocolate Chip Cookie, WTC. The T stands for triple. Her owner, Sydney Burns, named WTC White Chocolate Chip Cookie because she was light brown with white spots, just like a white chocolate chip cookie. WTC had huge round eyes and very silky fur. WTC loved to read, and Sydney read her a bedtime story every single night. Their favorite author was Edie Baker. Sydney was kind, helpful, smart. She knew that WTC could talk because one day, when WTC was getting her rabies shot, she said, "Ow!" and the doctor fainted. Sydney asked, "Did you just say ow, or am I dreaming?" WTC replied, "Yep, I did just say ow. And nope, you're not dreaming. You see, I was born on the blue moon, and it somehow gave me the power to talk." After that, they went home. WTC wished that other pets could read like herself. She always said, "I want other pets to enjoy reading like I do." WTC had many friends because Sydney's mom, Mrs. Burns, was a pet store owner. She brought home many pets. 5 fish, 10 hamsters, including WTC, 3 lizards, 2 cats, and 1 poodle. WTC had plenty to read because Sydney let her roam freely, but the other pets didn't because they were all kept in big cages. One day, WTC was staring at the family's bookshelf and she got an idea. "I want to make a library for all the neighborhood pets," she said to Sydney. "Okay, how can I help?" asks Sydney. "For starters, get me some award-winning children's books so I can copy them into smaller booklets. Then get me some markers and paper," answered WTC. "Okie dokie, artichoke," replied Sydney as she took off down the stairs. She rushed back a minute later with her arms full of books, some paper, and a tiny pencil in her hands. "Here, gasp! You gasp! Go, gasp!" Sydney huffed, handing WTC the books, which almost squished her, the paper, and the pencil. WTC spent all summer copying all the award-winning books, children's books, in the entire house. When it was finally time for Sydney to go to school, Sydney faked, "My head hurts." Mrs. Burns felt Sydney's forehead. "Oh my, you are very hot." You see, Sydney had microwaved a bag of rice and put it on her forehead so it would feel hot. "Do I have to go to school?" Sydney asked quickly. Mrs. Burns answers, "Not if you don't feel well." "Okay, then I'll be in my room." Sydney headed up the stairs. She took WTC out of her cage, removed the books from her bookshelf, and replaced them with the smaller books that WTC had finished. Later, when Sydney wasn't sick anymore, she asked her mom if she could let her neighborhood friends and their pets come over. Mrs. Burns said, "Sure, but no strangers, and you have to write a letter telling your friends to come over." Sydney wrote things like, Dear blank, August 2015. "I would truly appreciate if you came to my house with your pets this weekend. I have a surprise for you and your pets. I suggest you come at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock p.m. Thank you, and I hope you have a wonderful week. Your friend, Sydney." Unfortunately, Sydney did not have time to send them to her friends because just then the doorbell rang. Mrs. Burns went to open the door, and guess who she saw? The principal! He was a little old man with beady little eyes and a very long beard. "Are you crazy?" he screamed. "What do you mean?" asked Miss Burns. "What do you mean? What do you mean?" "I mean not sending your child to school on the first day of school. You know classes are announced today, you idiotic person," the old man screamed. Mrs. Burns started to cry. "Sydney is sick, and I always thought you were a very kind and gentle man. But clearly I was wrong." Suddenly there was a crack of thunder and a flash of lightning. It started to rain. "You can do anything, but Sydney is not, I repeat, not going to school today." "Well, fine, then your daughter is expelled," he yelled as he slammed the door behind him. When he left, Mrs. Burns sent Sydney's letters. "What do I do? What do I do?" Mrs. Burns worried aloud. "Take her to a boarding school?" "No." "Get her a private tutor?" "Perfect." The next day, Jamie, the private tutor, came. She had super duper boring lessons. Sydney hated Jamie's lessons, and she made sure Jamie knew it. One time, Sydney fell asleep during Jamie's history lesson on tea parties. And that is why Jamie started to say, until she was interrupted. "I wasn't asleep, Miss Jamie." "Young lady, this behavior is unacceptable. On Saturday, lessons will go from 3 to 5 p.m. "Why not today? I promise I'll pay extra attention," pleaded Sydney. "Okay," answered Jamie. The next weekend, at exactly 3 o'clock, her friends started trickling in with their pets. Chaw House was brewing. Dogs were barking at cats, and all kinds of hamsters, toads, and amphibians were running around. Cats and dogs were getting fur everywhere. Goldfish were rocking their bowls in anticipation. Sydney's friends finally calmed down their pets. And they all headed up to Sydney's room. The pets went wild when they saw all the little books that WTC had created. Dogs were practically ripping the small books apart in a tug-of-war. Cats were scratching each other up in a fight over a book. Mrs. Burns came upstairs to get something out of the printer when she heard the racket and came into Sydney's room. She exclaimed, "What is going on?" WTC and Sydney took turns explaining what happened, except for the part about being sick. Mrs. Burns responded, "This is a lot to wrap my mind around," and walked out of the room. Shortly after, everyone heard a thump. Mrs. Burns had fainted. Once she recovered, everyone was happy and enjoyed the rest of the party. Project Reflection. This story is inspired by Roald Dahl in many ways. First of all, my protagonists are all children. Sydney is a child. WTC is a child. And Sydney's friends are all children too. Most of Roald Dahl's protagonists are children. Matilda from Matilda is 4 years old. Danny from Danny, the champion of the world, is a child. James from James and the Giant is also very young. The only one of his protagonists who is an adult is Mr. Hoppy from SEO Trot. WTC is a young pet. Sydney is a child. Sydney's... Second, I use elements of magic. In reality, a hamster wouldn't be able to talk. In reality, animals cannot read either. In The Giraffe, the Pelly, and Me, the giraffe, the Pelly, and the monkey can talk, sing, and probably read too. In The Enormous Crocodile, Muggalump, Roly-Poly Bird, and the elephant say, "Run from the crocodile" to some children. Also, I use names from my own life. Sydney is my best friend's name. Burns is my other best friend's last name. Sophie from the BFJ is named after Roald Dahl's daughter. Third, my antagonists are not named. My antagonist is called the principal. Mrs. Burns is not called by her real name. and she is sort of an antagonist. Obviously, my story is inspired by Roald Dahl. About the author. Hello, my nickname is Smartie22. I go to Stevenson Pax Elementary School. My teacher's name is Trevor, and I like him because he makes me laugh. Trevor makes up really funny dances, like the chime dance. I call him Trevor. I live in Mountain View, California with my mother, father, and sister. My sister annoys me a lot. My dad has a black belt in Aikido. My mom is a librarian. I love to learn cursive because it was basically just swirls. It was very easy to learn. When I'm not in school, I read. I play with my Monster High dolls. I also enjoy Scratch. It's a computer program. I decided to write the Hamster Librarian because my mom is a librarian and hamsters are super cute. During the process of writing and typing the Hamster Librarian, I learned a few things, like how to write a great story and how to revise it. That's how I wrote the best story I have ever written. Thank you for taking the time to read my